What's the most racist thing you've seen in person? And how did you react? My name is Spanish, and when an ex of mine spoke about me to his cousin, the cousin replied, "Oh, you're dating a wetback? You don't have to put up with that." Spanish. When I worked at a grocery store, a woman only wanted black people to carry her groceries out. Black people meaning anyone with brown skin. Our manager, who was white, kept track of her and stepped in to help her with her groceries so she'd stop harassing me and a couple other co-workers. She'd even snap her fingers and yell across the room, "Excuse me, black girl, I need that black girl," pointing at me. I'm Polynesian and I ignored her. Ugh, that's one of the worst here in my opinion. Just because of how entitled that kind of person felt. Makes me want to smack the crap out of people. I ordered ground beef at an Italian butcher shop. The clerk went to dip it out of the already ground beef, and the owner, an old Italian woman, said, "No, grind him some of that, Chuck. This is for the moolies." I was stunned, but I didn't do anything. Terrible. I had to look it up. I have never even heard of that one. Added in case anyone wants to know where it comes from. Moolie, race, blacks. Shortened from melanzane, meaning eggplant in Italian. Eggplants have black skin. After work on a construction site, we were hanging out around a long picnic table drinking beer and eating snacks. One of the subcontractors, the owner of his framing company, starts complaining about his lazy crew. Starts comparing Hawaiians to NS, and I am the only other white guy at the table. I had already kicked him out of the office trailer for similar comments a week before, but I'm a kid compared to most of these guys and definitely the smallest. He's talking more and more, and I know I'm turning red with shame. Just as I was building up the nerve to say something, the guy sitting across from him throws a punch and he falls backward, out cold. Not one of us even bothered to get up. Guess someone was drinking too much of superior white man milk and thought that he was somehow invincible before all these lesser races. I was out to dinner with a friend in Kuala Lumpur with his work colleagues. Simple chatting, I thought, until I asked a man seated near me at the table what he did in Malaysia. He responded with, "I'm teaching these monkeys to walk upright." He actually works in a circus, just trying to help the locals generate more profit from tourists. What a nice man. I was a manager at a retail establishment and had a customer request a different associate help them because my associate was black. I told them that that associate was the best and only person in the store with a deep understanding of the subject matter they needed help with, and when the guy said, "Just because you're manager and feel bad for slavery doesn't mean you have to protect his N-word," but he got escorted out pretty fast. Lived in a small town, majority white with a few Latinos. Our high school of about 800 kids included exactly 3 black people. There was a clique of cowboy redneck types who always ate lunch together at the same fast food place. The rest of the kids never really went there, so they mostly had it to themselves. One day, one of the school's 3 black kids decided to stop in for a bite. A couple of the redneck kids dragged him outside and tried to string him up the flagpole by his neck. Holy cow. I'm a white guy and I dated a mixed girl for a while a few years ago. Oh boy, the racism. We do live in a rural town, so I expected ugly looks, which we got plenty of, but we also got other forms of racism. One time we were at an ice creamery. My GF stayed in the car and I went in to get us both some ice cream. I got the ice cream and got back in the car. I handed her the ice cream and I heard someone yell at us, "N lover." It was a douche looking redneck just watching us. I brushed it off and drove away. Another time we were in a grocery store buying soap. When we were walking out, I was holding my GF's hand and some old lady decided to take offense at this. But instead of acting like everyone else usually did, she didn't just give us a dirty look. She came over to tell us. She told us we were an abomination and that coloreds and whites shouldn't have relationships. First time I have ever wanted to hit an old lady. My GF was obviously upset, and so I told the lady to go frick herself. And I demanded an apology. She just walked away. No one stepped in to defend us, and no one said anything to lady. So we never went back to that store. I am always surprised when people in my town say that racism is not an issue, or say these things never happen. They do, and it's a problem. I'm also in an interracial relationship in the deep south. Surprisingly, I haven't heard any outright comments about my boyfriend and I, although I get the dirtiest looks from old white people and black women. Like, murder in their eyes. I'm used to it now, but I was pretty shocked when it first started happening. My youngest son was adopted. He is biracial, black and white, and both my wife and myself are white. We sent a picture to our families of us and the birth parents after our son was born. My mom texted it to my stepsister and my stepsister said they adopted a black baby. My mom was confused and responded by telling her that we did in fact adopt a child of African American descent. My stepsister followed up by saying they could have at least warned us. At least he's not all the way black. Maybe he'll look white enough and won't stand out in the family pictures. I never liked my stepsister anyway. She's a homeschooling anti-vaxxer who thinks evolution and climate change are myths. She thinks parents of kids with disabilities are being punished for their sins, etc. So I didn't lose anything by cutting her off completely. The rest of my siblings avoid her at all costs as well. My mom is civil, but doesn't like her either. Congratulations on the new addition to your family. Not my own, but my dad's. My dad's sister had lung cancer, smoked since she was 12. What do you expect? And after chemo she was given a few weeks to live. So my dad decides he's going to go say goodbye to his sister one last time. His first few days there he had no real eventful stories. But one day his sister invited some of her fellow churchgoers over to her house. After they got there and said hello to the sister, they went out to the living room and the first thing this lady, who my dad has never met nor heard of, and vice versa, says to my dad is I'm so glad that N is out of the White House. Like what the frick? That's not a conversation starter. What were you hoping he would say in reply? Couple stories, one mine and one my husband's. We recently moved from the Midwestern US to the Deep South. Our first day in our new neighborhood. The lady next door came to say hello, was all friendly and sweet, except for a passing comment that they had all sorts of problems with the black family next door. The very next day one of those supposedly problematic neighbors offered to help with some of the heavy lifting for our move. Since then, him and his family have always been friendly and perfectly polite neighbors. About a week ago, another neighbor on our block came and told my husband that he'd be having family visit and they'd be needing the visitor's spot in front of our house. And pretty please don't get them in trouble for using it for the week. Sure, fine, totally normal. Except then the guy insinuated that if he couldn't use ours, he'd have to use the one in front of the black family's house. And that would be such a horrible awful thing. Like, WTF. I mean I kind of expected some of this moving to the south, but this baseless bulls just baffles me. As someone who also moved from the Midwest to the south, this is what we've been seeing. One time I was ringing up an elderly man when I was a cashier at Value Village. He had some VHS tapes, and he told me he had 10. I still had to go through them all and check them to make sure there were tapes in there and they were correct. When I was doing this he's like, didn't you just hear me? There are 10. You probably don't even speak English, do you? Where are you from? Asia? Some island? Do you even speak English? Go back to your country. It was pretty ironic considering I'm Native American. Haha. I'm a brown girl from America, and I'm not originally from a Spanish-speaking country. I was shopping at a Victoria's Secret and an associate was freaking following me everywhere, flashing me butch glares like I was gonna steal something. She apparently comes up from behind in the most American girl accent. Tu necesita ayuda? Do you need help in Spanish? Emphasizing the ayuda. I'm looking at an item still cause I don't think she's talking to me. She asks again and again. This time very firmly. I turn around and I was like, are you talking to me? I don't speak Spanish. And she proceeds to ask again really loud and the customer next to me went ahead and said, she doesn't speak Spanish, lady. I had a pediatric patient whose mom was white, dad was black. Dad wasn't in the picture anymore. Mom's family was completely white and at bedside. Obviously, the family loved the patient, but regularly made disapproving comments about her black heritage. So the patient was admitted to our hospital because she had a bacterial infection of her blood, bacteremia. Patient was very active at home and she had a new cut on her toe from her activity. This was likely the source of the infection. But before I had a chance to explain this to the patient's family, grandma blurts out a question. Did this happen because she's black? Did her dirty skin infect her? I am also black, mind you. Important factor I forgot to mention. However, this is grandma. There were younger generations in the room, and I've experienced racism in this setting before. Usually there's at least one sane person in the room to jump to my defense. Unfortunately, the sane person I was looking for did not exist among this family. Shamefully, I did nothing. I sidestepped the comment and continued to counsel family on the actual source of infections and our plans to treat. It's sad to say that young professional black individuals face this type of stuff on a regular basis. The even sadder part is, if we at all want to progress and not be labeled as the angry black man woman, we have to swallow nearly all these encounters. Any type of protest will be flipped against us. But I shouldn't complain. I can't imagine the silent pain this young biracial girl will have to face growing up. I would have just let an awkward silence develop before continuing, to hopefully guilt trip her of the inappropriateness of the comment. I heard a conversation about how our part of the country used to have a KKK presence but doesn't anymore, and maybe that should change since we have so many expletives around here. Something about Katrina victims was stupid to live there and we shouldn't have to rebuild a ghetto full of expletives. Here's some direct quotes. "It's okay if you date a Mexican, but if you ever bring a expletive home, I'll kill you." The difference between an Indian, Native American, and a white man drinking is the white man will get up in the morning and go to work. The prairie expletive won't bother. I've grown up my whole life hearing this. I don't bother trying to change this person's mind. It wouldn't work. I just make sure to live differently and cancel out some of that person's effect. Didn't witness, but my dad told me this story about when he was doing this job in New York with his working buddies. The team are all Swedish and was sent on a contract to New York. One day on the subway there they saw a black person playing a guitar, fairly badly, in the middle of the subway train. One of dad's co-workers then blurted out "Dit gaan vol fan in spella jitter din jovla svarting," which roughly translates to "You can't play the guitar for frick's sake, you fricking black." As it turned out, the guitar player spoke fluent Swedish and promptly proceeded to punch the co-worker in the face, much to the rest of the guy's amusement. To this day I still wonder how small of a percentage there is of a black guitar player on the subway in New York City speaking fluent Swedish in the same cart they traveled in. It sounds like black Swedish speaking is the requirement since apparently he couldn't play the guitar. I worked in a local university as a student mall cop. Bike narc is a better description. I stopped people from biking in a no biking zone. I was the only white employee. All the other employees were Eastern Indian. One of the employees asked some Ashat to stop riding his bike and he stopped to argue with the employee. The jerk said he was glad Pajiks could come to America and earn American money because the rupee was covered in crap. I screamed at him, told him he was a racist mother and tried to frick him up with my hydro flask. Luckily my good friend and co-worker, a handsome and buff Indian man, held me back. I apologized to him about these people. I told him that he was a wonderful addition to our country. My friend said something that almost made me cry. This is paraphrasing. "It's been a couple of years, my friend. For every jerk like that I have met someone who shares your opinions. There are people like my neighbors, an elderly couple who invited me to their apartment to dinner when I moved in. They told me to consider them family, and I do. I went there for Thanksgiving. Then there is you. I could have killed that guy, and you know that, but you jumped at him first. You stood up for all of us and stood against someone who looks like you. If you came to my country you'd meet 10 guys like that. You might meet someone like you once in a long time. Because you stood up, I could stand down. Because you did this, I know this country is still great. There are buttholes everywhere, but there are also people like you." This should be top comment for the feels. I live in a small town that's white except for probably 7 people at most. I'm gonna skip the whole everyone being curious about them because that's new for a lot of people and they clearly stand out. One day I saw some older people starting a hate group. Children stopped it. "Why don't you like my new friends? They're really nice and help out anyone they can. You told me the Bible says to love everyone. Why are you all doing this? If everyone could see the world through the eyes of children, world people would be possible." I was with some friends at a dance club and my one friend and I stepped outside for a cigarette. A guy came up to us to bum one and hung around for a minute after we gave him one. His attempt at small talk was to say "really dark in there, huh? Real dark," while touching the skin on his arm and winking. We were just astounded. told the guy to frick off and went back inside. I have had similar situations happen to me and it's always middle-aged white men. They say something incredibly racist and because I'm white they assume I'll agree with them. It's really fricked up. I was doing some online gaming with a friend and we joined a group of his friends. They were all white and seemed nice, but they didn't realize I was not white and out of nowhere decided to make racist jokes, comments and talk bad about a lot of the other races, especially the African American race. I sat there quiet as racist joke after racist joke was said. Finally my friend, also taken aback at the comments, speaks up and tells them I was there and the chat gets real silent. I told them no, continue, don't stop on my account. Wish it was the only time racism like that has happened to me. I was doing some online gaming. This could be a category unto itself. I finally broke down and joined a gaming group mostly to have a regular bunch to team up with where this kind of BS isn't tolerated. I was walking home once from a restaurant and a group of elderly white people started swearing, cursing and even throwing their cigarette ash at me. All was within a few minutes. I don't understand what triggered this or why they have so much hatred. When you move into the suburbs, you have to be ready for some real shoots like this. People reporting you if your grasses are too tall or if you park on the sidewalk. You had a run-in with probably one of the hardest gangs in town. I have a very Hispanic last name but don't look very Hispanic. I had just bought brand new C7 Corvette, one of the first production 500 off the line. They were still radically new and the service department wanted to give it a once over prior to delivery. I go back to the service department and see my service advisor talking to an older gentleman that had the look of a good ole boy rural Texan. My advisor says to his colleague, "Can you get Mr. Hispanic's car?" Colleague brings out my new baby and says, "Here you go. 4 miles on the odometer. Enjoy every mile after that." Good ole Texan says, "I never thought I'd see the day when a Mexican would have a nicer car than me." I was shocked, but too overwhelmed by the thought of getting behind the wheel, so I just ignored it and went about my day. It was until later in the week I got a little upset, but chances are he was raised where he was superior to all others, so I just let it go again. A friend's dad was flipping through channels and when he came across a basketball game, he said "frickin' coon ball" and kept flipping. I feel so bad for laughing at some of this crap, but this one got me a little. Just the mental image. I had a boss one time at my past job say something about a client, and then say, "Oh well, that's a Jew for you," or "Well that's because she's a Jew," and roll her eyes. I stood there, astounded, and then, "You can't say that. That's not okay," popped out of my mouth. I almost wished I hadn't said anything, but at the same time I was glad I did. She tried to play it off as if she was joking or she didn't mean what she'd actually said. She wasn't successful at it and walked off. My co-worker, who was from Germany no less, she and I just silently turned and looked at each other after my boss walked away. Looks of horror. Boss never said anything like that in front of me ever again. I was at a bus stop in the city, and there were quite a few people there too, one of whom was an older Chinese lady, probably 40 or so. Anyway, some old coot walks up and starts abusing the crap out of her, yelling about how all the yellow W were trying to take over Australia, and that all these bastards must go home or die. You know, usual stuff. Thing is, I am pretty sure that the old lunatic was at least part Chinese herself. My dad told me that he thinks it should still be illegal for blacks and whites to marry. He says it is liberal propaganda that we are all the same. That means I'm double illegal. I'm Afro-Hispanic and mixed race. Oops. Some random guy shouting at me on a train in NYC when I was in my school uniform, consisting of navy blue pants, a white collared shirt, tzitzit and a kippah, started throwing Jewish slurs at me. I basically just treated it like a wild animal. Stood still and pretended not to be there. I was like 9 or 10. I witnessed a guy laugh and egg on racist remarks and actions towards my Chinese friend. Poor girl. Funny thing is, he was Italian. I retorted something back and he said he would sue me for a hate crime. Jewish shop owner was being talked down by a bunch of people. I didn't know what to do. I was only 13 at the time. Now that I'm older, I would have stood up and called the police. It still makes me feel guilty. I went to the bar with a friend of mine and we both got pretty drunk. After bar close we were waiting for an Uber and there were some Somalian guys hanging out talking. My friend started yelling ISIS at them. We are no longer friends. Solid call on that one, mate. I went to high school in a small rural town during Obama's inauguration. One of my classmates came to school that day with a stick figure holding a spear painted on his truck with the caption "No Obama." We also watched the actual ceremony in class, and I saw multiple kids pretending to fire rifles at the screen while Obama was on camera. I knew it wasn't the most progressive town in America, but I was surprised by the blatancy of it. When I worked in a warehouse, my husband, who was my BF at the time, brought me lunch. When this certain guy seen, he told me I was disgusting to be with a black guy and that no one would ever want me after. He was legitimately grossed out by me. I once saw a guy shoulder barge an Indian fella and call him a black C. After 28 years in NZ, I spent a few days in Sydney and this happens within an hour of being there. When I was 16 I was walking across town at 3 AM with two boys. One was 13, though he was 6 feet 1 inches and told everyone he was 17 so I didn't know, and one was 18. The 18-year-old was wearing baggy jeans with some blood on them, a white t-shirt, and jail slides. I was wearing a corset, skirt, fishnets, and platform heels with nails sticking out of them with my face painted up. I had 7 facial piercings, and my nose ring had a chain to my ear. The last one, we'll call him Joe, was in normal jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt. A cop stopped us, asked what we were doing out so late and accused us of a loud bang. A transformer blew and he was cool with that explanation. Then he proceeded to take ID cards. I filled out so many as a teenager. Has your height, weight, skin and eye color, scars, tattoos etc. When we expected him to leave, he searched only Joe. He didn't just pat him down and check his pockets, like I've had happen other times. He took his hat off, had him take his shoes and socks off, removed his belt, and checked every fold and crease of his clothes imaginable. We were then let go. As we're walking away, the older one said, "Thank God, I have a cap of M in my pocket." I didn't have anything too bad, but I had a knife and cigarettes which as a minor would have been taken and fined. Joe had nothing on him but a gum wrapper. Couple days later we're at the house we all stayed at. About 15 kids, 1 adult, the mother of one of the kids. The mother was dating some guy, them both being in their 50s. Joe and I are on the porch when the guy shows up flipping out screaming about the mother being her in-lover. Joe wasn't bothered by the comment, especially since he didn't know it was relating to him. Dude turns around, drives back swearing he was going to kill Joe for sleeping with the mother. He never did. He was a fairly innocent, quiet kid but walked with confidence. I convinced him to come inside and told the mother when she got off work. We were hiding in my room when they went at it about Joe. The remarks he made about this delusion about a 17, really 13, and 50-something person having an affair and people of color was insane. There is so much WTF going on in this post. Work at a hospital. Patient was transferred to my unit from the ICU, was the passenger in a car crash where the driver died. Drugs and alcohol were involved. Patient was wheeled through the unit on a stretcher to their room, accompanied by their parents. Got to their new room, saw their roommate, stated out loud through their wired shut jaw, "I'm not going into a room with a N." You'd think going through a life-changing experience like losing a friend in a terrible accident, almost dying yourself, you might have a new outlook on life. Not this person. They sat in the hall on the stretcher for about an hour until another patient was discharged and the room was cleaned. Frick that person. Had a student job as a cashier for the little store here in Belgium. Had 2 African dudes that asked me in English if they could pay in sterling pound very nicely. I told them that, as in a store and not in a bank, I can't take their money unless they pay in euro, which they did. Right after that, the next customer, an old lady, tell me that stranger couldn't be able to pay with same money as her because they basically use her money. I, myself, am half Mauritian but as a cashier I wasn't authorized to say something. By chance, the customer next to her replied immediately, "What do you do for a living? Oh, you're unemployed? I'm Canadian and work for your land while you're doing nothing. I contribute more to your economy than you. What you gonna say about that?" I obviously fist bump him. His response was epic. Stranger couldn't be able to pay with same money as her because they basically use her money. I don't even understand what she was trying to say with this. I had just finished a job interview. I'm a line cook and was standing outside this restaurant having a cigarette with all my kitchen knives. This huge frat douche was walking around super drunk and passed two Asian guys. Out of nowhere he shoved them into the wall of a building and said frick you, Jeremy Lin. At first, I just watched as they shouted at one another. I should note that I am also Asian and that this frat douche was enormous. His buddy was more average sized. Frat douche looks at me and I'm almost certain he's about to say the frick you looking at, chunk, but apparently I had taken my 10-inch chef's knife out of my bag and was holding it rather passively at my side. Don't even remember doing it. I'm kind of frozen from fear, curiosity, anger, and I just kind of stare back at him and then he leaves and everyone disperses. Realizing I'm holding a weapon in public, I quickly put away my knives and get out of there. That's really all that happened, but it was such a random act of racism and I reacted in both a fearful and aggressive way. I still don't really know what to make of it. This was New York City in 2013, by the way. Racism is everywhere. My old store manager once refused to talk to a customer about an interview because they were a freaking Muslim and he wasn't going to waste his time with a freaking Muslim. The guy was Sikh and I had to go back and tell him the manager was busy and to apply for the position online. My old store manager was a dong. He's not a store manager anymore. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.